This is what remains of the Kenya police helicopter that reportedly had 7 people on board from Wilson Airport in Nairobi heading to Homa Bay County. On board was 7 people, and among those confirmed dead were Internal Security Minister and presidential aspirant Professor George Saitoti.
Professor George Saitoti, commonly referred to as Professor Saitoti, tragically died on 10th June 2012 in a helicopter crash near the Ngong Hills, just west of Nairobi. At the time, he was serving as Kenya's Minister for Internal Security and Provincial Administration, and was widely recognized by his extensive political career, including role as Vice President, Minister for Finance, and a respected mathematics academia. Welcome to Dark Echoes 254, where Kenya's shadows speak. Today, we uncover the mysterious death and powerful legacy of Professor George Saitoti. Subscribe for more untold truths from the deep. Dark Echoes 254. George Musengi Saitoti was born on August 3, 1945 in Rongai, Kajiado County to Kikuyu parents. Though he was later adopted into a Maasai family after his father fled colonial persecution during the Mau Mau uprising. This unique cultural duality, born Kikuyu and raised Maasai, would go on to define his public life and political identity. He began his education at Olosikon Primary School and later joined the prestigious Mangu High School, where he showed exceptional promise in mathematics and the sciences. His academic excellence earned him a scholarship to Brandeis University in Massachusetts, where he studied mathematics and economics. Driven by a deep intellectual curiosity, Saitoti went on to pursue postgraduate studies in the UK, earning a master's degree from the University of Sussex, and later completing a PhD in algebraic topology at the University of Warwick in 1972. Upon returning to Kenya, he joined the University of Nairobi as a lecturer and eventually became the head of the mathematics department. Between 1976 and 1979, he also served as vice president of the African Mathematical Union, working to strengthen the mathematical education across the continent. Though he would later become one of Kenya's most influential political figures, Saitoti's roots were firmly in academia, where he published works on both pure mathematics and economic policy, most notably the challenges of economic and institutional reform in Africa, which reflected his commitment to African-led development solutions. His transition from academia to politics would later make him one of Kenya's most influential and enigmatic statesmen. After establishing himself as one of Kenya's foremost mathematicians and academics, George Musengi Saitoti transitioned into economic policy and international leadership with equal brilliance and strategic foresight. His training in mathematics had honed his analytical mind, but it was his deep understanding of economics paired with his calm, technocratic demeanor that made him an ideal candidate for leadership in Kenya's complex economic landscape during the 1980s and 1990s. Saitoti entered public service formally in 1983 when President Daniel Arap Moi nominated him as a member of parliament and appointed him Kenya's Minister for Finance. At the time, Kenya was grappling with a challenging post-oil shock economy, spiraling inflation, and increasing pressure from international financial institutes to adopt structural adjustment programs. As finance minister, Saitoti was tasked with navigating these turbulent waters while keeping the economy stable and maintaining the government's social spending commitments. He worked closely with World Bank and International Monetary Fund, balancing Kenyan sovereign interests with the conditions tied to foreign aid and loans. His credibility and intellect earned him the prominent international roles. From 1919 to 1991, Saitoti served as executive chairman of the Board of Governors of the World Bank and the IMF, a rare honor for African statesmen. In this position, he not only represented Kenya but also became a voice for the broader developing world, advocating for more equitable lending terms and Africans' ownership of reform agendas. He was also instrumental in negotiating financial packages that would alleviate debt burdens on African countries while pushing for investments in key sectors like education, agriculture, and infrastructure. Between 1999 and 2000, he took on another influential role as president of the African, Caribbean, and Pacific Group of States, a coalition of countries negotiating economic agreements with the European Union. During his tenure, Saitoti played a key role in the Cotonou Agreement, which sought to improve trade relations and development cooperation between the EU and the ACP countries. His leadership emphasized the need to fair trade, sustainable development, and mutual respect between Africa and its European partners. Throughout his economic career, Saitoti maintained a reputation for being methodical, soft-spoken, and result-oriented. He was not a populist, nor was he known for political theatrics. Instead, he built his legacy on intellectual rigor and policy depth. His economic thought was best captured in his book, The Challenges of Economic and Institutional Reforms in Africa, in which he dissected the pitfalls of external imposed reforms and argued that African-led homegrown solutions to development. In both national and international cycles, he was viewed as a stabilizing figure, someone who could bridge the gap between donor institutions and national government without compromising Kenya's dignity. George Musengi Saitoti's political career spanned nearly 3 decades and was defined by strategic resilience, loyalty to state institutions, and a quiet but firm command of power. His entry into politics was both calculated and historic. In 1983, President Daniel Arap Moi nominated him as a member of parliament and immediately appointed him as a minister for finance. Just 6 years later, in 1989, Saitoti was appointed vice president of Kenya, a position he would hold on for an unprecedented 13 years, making him the longest-serving vice president in the country's history. As vice president, Saitoti operated within the complex and often volatile environment of the single-party KANU regime. Moi trusted him, in part because of his technocratic background and also because of his quiet loyalty. While other ambitious ministers plotted and postured, Saitoti kept his head down and focused on delivering within his assignment dockets. Though not considered charismatic by the political elite or general public, he was widely respected for his discipline, intellect, and calm presence. He handled politically sensitive ministry including finance, planning, education, and later internal security. One of the most politically damaging moments of his career was his alleged involvement in the Goldberg scandal, a massive corruption scheme in the early 1990s involving fictitious gold exports that cost the country billions of shillings. As finance minister during part of that period, Saitoti was implicated by the Bosiro Commission of Inquiry. However, in 2006, the High Court cleared his name, citing lack of evidence. Despite the long shadow the scandal cast over his legacy, Saitoti remained active in politics and remained public trust, partly due to his clean personal reputation and dignified demeanor. In 2002, as Moi prepared to retire, many expected Saitoti, his longtime deputy, to be endorsed as a successor. Instead, Moi chose the younger and less experienced Uhuru Kenyatta, a move that humiliated Saitoti. His response was famously restrained but firm, stating, "There comes a time when the nation is more important than an individual." This marked a turning point in his political identity as he joined the opposition against Moi's chosen successor. He later aligned with Mwai Kibaki and played a key role in formation of the National Rainbow Coalition, NAC, which ended KANU's 40-year rule in the 2002 general election. Under President Kibaki, Saitoti served as Minister of Education from 2003 to 2008, where he led reforms including the implementation of free primary education, a policy that drastically improved school enrollments across Kenya. In 2008, following the post-election crisis, he was appointed Minister for Internal Security, a position he held until his death in 2012. In this role, he oversaw major security operations, including the launch of Operation Linda Nchi, Kenya's military intervention in Somalia against Al-Shabaab. By the time of his death, Saitoti had declared his intention to run for president in the 2013 elections. He was seen as a moderate, experienced, and unifying figure, someone who could bridge tribal divides and restore a sense of professionalism in governance. His death in a helicopter crash in June 2012 cut short what many believed would have been a steady and credible bid for the presidency. George Saitoti's role in Kenyan security and military affairs was both complex and consequential, especially during his final years in government. As Minister of Internal Security and Provincial Administration from 2008 until his death in 2012, Saitoti was tasked with overseeing one of the most sensitive and powerful dockets in the country. His responsibilities included the Kenya Police, Administration Police, National Security Intelligence Services, provincial administration, and the coordination of counter-terrorism strategies in a region increasingly threatened by extremist violence and organized crime. Saitoti took over the security docket in the aftermath of 2007 and 2008 post-election violence, one of the Kenya's darkest periods, where over 1,000 people were killed and hundreds of thousands displaced. His immediate challenge was to restore public confidence in law enforcement institutions that had been accused of excessive force, complicity in ethnic violence, and systematic corruption. He advocated for reforms in police training and command structures and emphasized community policing models. While progress was slow and resistance within the force remained strong, Saitoti was seen as a stabilizing figure in a deeply politicized security landscape. Perhaps the most defining aspect of his security tenure was his involvement in Kenya military incursion into Somalia Operation Linda Nchi, launched in October 2011. This marked the first time since independence that Kenya officially deployed its military beyond its borders in a large-scale, open military campaign. The operation was a response to a series of kidnapping and attacks by the Al-Shabaab militant group, including the abduction of tourists and aid workers near Kenya borders. These incidents threatened Kenya's national security and tourism industry, prompting the government to act decisively. Though the military campaign was under the Ministry of Defense, it was Saitoti as the Internal Security Minister who became the face and voice of the operation to the public. In press briefings and parliamentary sessions, he outlined the government's security objectives: to neutralize Al-Shabaab's capacity to infiltrate Kenya, secure the porous border, and create a buffer zone inside Somalia known as Jubaland, which would be controlled by allied Somali forces. Saitoti also worked closely with regional partners and international allies, especially the African Union and the United States, which provided logistical and intelligence support. During this period, Saitoti emphasized that Kenya's war with Al-Shabaab was not just military but ideological, stressing the importance of counter-radicalization and intelligence gathering. He oversaw crackdowns on extremist cells believed to be operating within Kenya, particularly in Nairobi, Mombasa, and the northeastern region. His leadership was firm but measured, avoiding inflammatory rhetoric even as the threat of terror escalated. In one of his final speeches, he warned that Al-Shabaab had already infiltrated parts of Kenyan society and called for unity and vigilance among citizens. Behind the scenes, Saitoti was also reportedly involved in national counterterrorism strategies and the restructuring of intelligence coordination. He is also believed to have pushed for greater inter-agency cooperation between the police, intelligence services, and military, though bureaucratic rivalries remained an obstacle. In summary, George Saitoti's security and military involvement was marked by calculated leadership in a time of rising insecurity, both domestically and regionally. Through Operation Linda Nchi, counterterrorism efforts, and police reform initiatives, he left behind a legacy of calm but resolute security stewardship, one that acknowledged Kenya's evolving threats and laid groundwork for future internal and external defense strategies. The death of Professor George Saitoti on June 10, 2012 sent shockwaves across Kenya and the region. A seasoned politician, scholar, a statesman, Saitoti was widely seen as a frontrunner in the race to succeed President Mwai Kibaki in the 2013 general election. On that fateful morning, Saitoti, alongside his assistant minister Orwa Ojode, 2 pilots and 2 bodyguards, perished when the Eurocopter AS-350 helicopter crashed into the Kibiku forest near Ngong Hills shortly after takeoff. They were en route to a church fundraiser in Dhiwa, Homa Bay County. The crash occurred under unclear circumstances, igniting a wave of speculation, suspicion, and conspiracy theories, especially given Saitoti's deep involvement in security matters and his presidential ambitions. Investigators concluded that the cockpit may have had a faulty exhaust system or a ventilation leak, allowing toxic fumes to enter and incapacitate the crew mid-flight. Pilot incapacitation. Both pilots likely lost consciousness due to the poisoning, which explains why the helicopter veered off course and crashed shortly after takeoff. There were no signs of distress call or recovery attempt, supporting the theory that the pilots were already unconscious or disoriented. Poor aircraft maintenance. The helicopter, a Eurocopter AS-350, had known mechanical issues prior to the flight. Investigators cited maintenance lapses, including failures to detect or fix cabin ceiling problems that may have allowed carbon monoxide to seep in. The aircraft was relatively new, but records showed inconsistencies and gaps in the service logs. Weather conditions. Initial reports speculated about fog, but the commission found that weather was not a primary factor. Visibility was reduced, but not enough to explain the crash without the carbon monoxide explanation. No evidence of sabotage or foul play. The commission ruled out sabotage, conspiracy, or external interference. The public and some officials remained skeptical, especially given Saitoti's high political profile, security docket, and presidential ambitions. Whispers of assassination, internal political sabotage, and intelligence intrigue has lingered for years, particularly because Saitoti had hinted in the months before his death that he was being surveilled and had received threats, allegedly tied to his uncompromising stance on internal security and terrorism. Saitoti's death robbed Kenya of one of the most qualified, level-headed, and experienced leaders at a critical time in its political transition. He was a man of paradoxes, quiet but powerful, reserved but deeply respected, a mathematician turned economist, an academic turned politician, and a man of both Maasai and Kikuyu roots. Saitoti embodied the complex fabric of modern Kenya. In his identity alone symbolized unity in a country often divided along tribal lines. In terms of legacy, Saitoti is remembered for several major contributions. The first, longest-serving vice president from 1989 to 2002, known for loyalty and stability during turbulent political times. architect of free primary education, which saw millions of children gain access to schooling under the Kibaki administration. Strategist behind Operation Linda Nchi, Kenya's first modern military intervention beyond its borders. A champion of African-led economic reform, particularly during his time with the IMF, World Bank, and ACP EU negotiations. Despite the controversies and allegations tied to his name, particularly the Goldenberg scandal, from which he was later cleared, Saitoti maintained a clean personal reputation. He was known to live modestly, rarely engaged in political theatrics, and was often seen as a technocrat in a political world. His final public message, repeated just weeks before his death, still echoes with eerie finality. There comes a time when the nation is more important than an individual. Once a response to betrayal has since become a symbol of selfless patriotism and quiet strength, an epitaph befitting a man whose intellect and integrity helped shape Kenya's modern states. In the end, George Saitoti left behind more questions than answers. A quiet man who walked through power, danger, and destiny without even raising his voice. His brilliance was unquestioned, his loyalty tested, his death unresolved. If these echoes start something in you, don't let them fade. Subscribe to Dark Echoes 254, where truth is never buried and silence is never the end. Until next time, stay curious and stay awake.